know that the Attorney General's intervention was because the unions wrote to the Attorney General. It's not because, the government system as it currently is somehow found a way to involve the Attorney General. You would assume that for a transaction of this size, perhaps advice of the Attorney General would have been, sensible for the board itself to request, especially once it became a controversial issue. The second thing that I think is also very important to note, and I think some of your guests have hinted at it, is that the Tema refinery situation is one marked by considerable self-dealing and insider dealing. So this attempt to now change Torrentco into Tema Energy and Processing Limited was done in connivance with board members. So board members actually went to the extent of working with some of the workers who they perceived to be in opposition to create a trust and then give shares to those trusts controlled by a few of the employees. I mean, where does this happen in the public sector? So let me explain this very carefully so you understand. This company started because the former CEO of TOR, once he left the company, created a shell company to come and take over Shell. Bear that in mind. That's how it started. That's decimal. Then he realized that he could not do it without involving other people. So other people then came on board. And then over time, it was recognized that because he had been arrested or indicted on corruption grounds, his involvement was beginning to prevent them from accessing funds and other benefits. So he was then more or less removed, and another person then took over. When that person took over and created Bay Bridge, they then found out there were still challenges with reputational issues. So they now changed to Torrentco. And then when they found opposition from the workers, they did two things. They brought on board some of the workers as shareholders now of the SPV. And then secondly, one of the suppliers that had been indicated as one of the group of entities that were going to help them acquire capacity was brought on board as CAD as an investor. So this is clearly what we call in local parlance referekobo. You know what I mean? So these are people that are basically walking around trying to do a deal. I understand their arguments up to a point. The argument being that they did not present themselves as having the capacity. Rather, they presented themselves as having the creativity to come up with a solution that will get TOR going. Because at this stage, TOR is so badly managed that they were the least evil, they were the least of all the evils that were potentially possible, given that nobody will give TOR money, etc., etc. But the problem is that their involvement prolongs the agony. It keeps, given all that we now learned, TOR's reputation is in tatters. So we go back to the insider dealing matter. When you look at TOR's board, I told you that TOR's former CEO left the company, tried to take it over. On top of that, certain board members then worked with a so-called incoming investor to create a charity trust that is supposed to be on behalf of the workers. But I should also tell you that one of the current board members at TOR is a very strong business partner of the previous CEO of TOR. And then the other top board members that are there, the majority of them are either politicians and strong members of the ruling party, or good friends of politicians or business partners of politicians. You can't have corporate governance when everything is designed to facilitate insider dealing and self-dealing. So that is the fundamental problem of TOR. The second issue that we have to then recognize is that where we are now, TOR's reputation is in tatters. There is a private company, a Chinese funded company that is coming in with 3 times TOR capacity. And they are now demanding massive concessions from the government, including $261 million in tax reliefs. And on top of that, asking the government to sell them crude oil in local currency on very favorable terms to produce. So everybody has become used to an environment in which office bearers do what they want, are constantly self-dealing, are constantly involved in making money or trying to make money through the beneficence of the public purse. And we have somehow sleepwalked into a situation where nobody is accountable, nobody resigns, nobody takes anything at all as a matter of the gravest integrity at all. So that's where we are with TOR.
I see. And as we understand, and Bright, this is supposed to be the latest in the series of opinions that the Attorney General has issued on this matter. The Attorney General has issued at least 3 different opinions. Now, does it look to you that but for such interventions, PPA set up with the capacity to scrutinize all of this would have escaped once again?
It's worse than you think. It's worse than you think because when the matter was sent to PPA, which is the Public Procurement Authority, PPA found itself incapable of making definite comments. All these things around the due diligence process, don't forget the private law firm was hired to do extensive due diligence and issue preliminary reports, which already was damning because there was evidence that there was no capacity. There was evidence of poor compliance. Now, it's not just capacity. There was also evidence that this entity treats compliance with disdain. You know, annual reports they're supposed to file, they don't care and things like that. All of that was available. PPA, which we think as at this stage is not fit for purpose because it's been captured by politicians, right? So PPA was not bold enough to say, look, given everything that we see, this is not making sense. What they did was then refer the matter to the Ministry of Finance, claiming that because it looks like a public-private partnership, to their mind, the Ministry of Finance was the appropriate authority. Now remember that the board of TOR now claims in their own explanations that they involve the Ministry of Energy, they involve the Ministry of Finance, and they involve the State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA. That's what the board of TOR says. Did they indeed involve these organizations? What did these organizations say? Given that these facts that the Attorney General has made apparent is known to everybody, what did these important government institutions say? What are their heads saying? What is the Ministry of Energy saying? Why have none of them bothered to issue a statement saying, yes, this was what was brought before us, and this was what we advised, etc., etc. If this is not state capture of the worst sort, how come none of these organizations or major government authorities, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Finance, SIGA, why are they quiet? How come none of them have said anything substantive or substantial about these proceedings? So that tells you that this goes beyond simply a matter of whether or not somebody has oversight, you know, or had oversight of some of the key issues at the PPA level. This is really a matter of grave damage to the integrity of the systems that are supposed to make sure that the public interest is protected.
My final question to you will be, do you think that, or you have expectations that these sort of investigations and due diligence by state organizations will not just end here by saying you have been stopped, but potentially some people will have to face some consequences?
So from everything that we've seen, it's obviously not, because the board is not even recognizing that the statements that they've made give clear evidence of a board that is completely bereft of its capacity to assert its fiduciary duties. It's clear, but the board doesn't even seem to acknowledge it. They said that the DDR, the due diligence process was ongoing, and that at some point these were constitution precedent. But we have evidence that shows that TEPL had already gone to TOR and has started issuing instructions around the place. They had already hired people to start taking control of the assets and things like that. So on what basis is an incomplete due diligence process the foundation for allowing a private operator to enter a state institution like TOR and start to issue instructions to workers and start to take control of access, etc., etc.? Okay. The board has absolutely no self-awareness of the degree to which they failed in discharging their fiduciary responsibilities, and that's the problem.
All right.
This lack of self-awareness of the Ghanaian elite in acknowledging the degree to which they often fail in discharging their obligations to the people of this country is why this country is sinking.
All right.
So we have no expectations whatsoever that anybody on the board will wake up and say, or stand up and say, look, we really did mess up. Absolutely not.
Thank you very much, Bright Simmons.